In the 1990s, residents of Southern California began complaining more and more of strange sounds that seemed to split the sky into pieces. Unidentified black triangles were being noticed in photographs from space, and billions of dollars were allocated in the U.S. Air Force budget, the purpose of which was explained as black programs. Some call it just a coincidence. Others are convinced it's nothing more than Project Aurora, a plane whose existence has been denied for decades. However, as technology developed, there were fewer and fewer excuses why such a device could not exist. So maybe behind the veil of disinformation, there's been a stubborn reality hidden all this time, which they're simply in no hurry to reveal to you and me. The Pentagon's Black World, where programs like Aurora are conducted, is not actually a separate, secret military force. It's more like a clandestine network distributed across all the Pentagon services and other agencies. However, the scale of this network can be fully assessed from unclassified Pentagon budget documents, which include general spending and mention of classified programs only in the form of code names or vague general headings with a certain amount next to them. For example, in the Pentagon's budget request for FY 1993, the black budget was about $16 billion, which was 17% of the Pentagon's entire R&D and production budget and exceeded the budgets of the lion's share of Western countries. While the place for conducting almost all tests related to the most secret programs is traditionally considered to be Groom Lake. But many of you probably know this area under another, more popular name, Area 51. In addition to the many hangars of varying sizes and the surrounding terrain dotted with warnings about the consequences for onlookers, Groom Lake has one very interesting feature: a runway on the bottom of a long, dried lake 6 miles long, which is at least twice as long as the longest runways in the United States. Such an extra long strip can only be intended for one purpose: an aircraft with very high minimum flight speeds. But the U.S. Air Force, of course, denies that Aurora or any other high-speed craft is among the secrets lurking in the Nevada desert. About a year and a half after the SR-71 Blackbird was officially retired, one June morning in 1991, a deafening sonic boom rolled across the Southern California basin. It was loud enough to make locals nervous about an earthquake. Seismologists were quick to reassure everyone that it was definitely not a natural phenomenon, strategically failing to mention that the June 1991 hum and other hums they tracked a little later, between October 1991 and June 1992, were caused by an unknown aircraft traveling at Mach 3 to 4, or 2,000 to 2,650 miles per hour. So maybe seismologists picked up vibrations from the shuttle? Well, firstly, the shuttle flies much faster during re-entry, and secondly, no shuttles landed on those dates. Another potential candidate capable of reaching that speed at the time was the recently retired SR-71, which had set a world speed record of 2,193 miles per hour, or Mach 3.3 back in 1976. The trajectory plotted by seismologists passed northeast over Los Angeles through the Mojave Desert on the way between Death Valley and Las Vegas, gently hinting at the Nellis test site, the largest military testing site in the Western world. Generally speaking, the public began warming up to the topic of a new high-speed spy plane back in the 1980s. For example, in the winter of 1988, the New York Times reported that the U.S. Air Force was working on a stealth reconnaissance aircraft capable of Mach 6, or about 4,000 miles per hour, citing Pentagon sources. And in early 1990, Aviation Week picked up on the story, again mentioning the mysterious aircraft that people could clearly hear at night as it regularly took off from Edwards Air Force Base. One of the magazine's readers even reported seeing the plane fly about 400 miles in 6 minutes over the Pacific Ocean. A little later in 1992, the Scottish newspaper The Scotsman reported on the terrifying noise heard by locals near the Machrihanish base, one of the most remote and inaccessible air bases in Europe. One witness reported hearing a noise so loud it was as if he were standing right underneath a military plane taking off. Note that Machrihanish was considered one of the quieter bases, used primarily as a staging area for heavily loaded C-5s and maritime surveillance aircraft patrolling the North Atlantic. Although in 1986, it was also linked to another secret aircraft, the F-117 Nighthawk. In the same year of 1992, strange contrails appeared over Amarillo, Texas, which observers described as donuts on a string, and just a few days later, similar contrails were seen near Machrihanish. Now let's go back a few years. In 1989, Chris Gibson, who was working on the Galveston Key oil rig in the North Sea and was a former member of the British Royal Observer Corps, responsible for identifying and counting aircraft over the UK, saw two F-111s escorted by an unknown aircraft in the shape of a perfect isosceles triangle with a leading edge of 75 degrees, which was slightly longer than the F-11 and was being refueled in midair by a KC-135 tanker flying nearby. It was Aurora, or what we call Aurora. All these observations led to a clear idea that the mysterious SR-91 aircraft, better known as Aurora, was ready for operation by mid-1989. And considering the fact that such ambitious aircraft are not created even in 1 year and the record-breaking altitude and speed characteristics of Aurora, the program for its creation should have begun no later than 1982. The Reagan administration, which took office in 1981, discovered that it had the technological foundations to build a hypersonic aircraft. The SR-71 had already flown thousands of covert missions over China, North Vietnam, the Middle East, and regularly circled the Soviet Union, never fully violating Eisenhower's overflight ban, but constantly irritating Soviet air defenses. According to various sources, between 800 and 4,000 missiles were fired at the Blackbird, and not a single one of them was even scratched. However, enemy air defenses were also developing, so the U.S. felt the need for an aircraft with a higher speed and altitude ceiling than the legendary SR-71 so that it could easily go beyond the range of any existing enemy missile. The most likely contractor for such a project was Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, which had previously given us many unique secret devices. The key factor in the hypersonic Aurora was not so much its hypersonic mode and engine, which can operate equally efficiently at different speeds, but its thermal regulation. Skin friction pumps thermal energy into the aircraft, and it must be pumped out if your aircraft is to have any endurance. The only way to do this is to heat the fuel before it enters the engine and dump the heat overboard through the exhaust pipe. Simply put, the cooling capacity of the fuel must be used intelligently and efficiently. Otherwise, the SR-91's range and endurance would be limited by heat rather than its fuel capacity. And let's not put aside the importance of using high-temperature materials. You don't want to see your plane's wings melting from the cockpit at hypersonic speeds, do you? The critical moment for the accelerator was the transonic zone in the region of Mach 1. The Aurora's fuel load is likely extremely high given the need for long-range espionage flight. That is, the craft is full of fuel. The ramjet cycle's barely working and the drag hits a hump. Even the streamlined SR-71 normally dives through the transonic regime so as to break through it faster and save fuel. The turbo ramjet engine, in which the ramjet and turbojet share an inlet and nozzle, and the ramjet's combustion chamber also serves as an afterburner, was an excellent solution to the SR-91's booster problem. The Blackbird J58 engine came close to this solution since it bypassed most of the airflow during cruise flight over the empty engine. In a real turbo ramjet engine, the process continues further and the turbojet section is completely switched off at cruising speeds. However, the problem with this approach is that the turbojet engine and the variable inlet and nozzle are dead weight and extra weight in cruise flight. After all, turbojet engines are, frankly speaking, not small since they must be powerful enough for takeoff, climb, and transonic acceleration. So a behemoth like the Aurora would require at least 4 large fighter engines. Like the Blackbird, the Aurora will likely require a 2-person crew in the cockpit, a pilot and reconnaissance systems operator, RSO. As for visibility, the SR-91 has very little of it since a conventional windshield would create too much drag and would heat up wildly when flying at colossal speeds. On the other hand, does visibility matter when you're going at more than a mile a second? By the time the pilot's eye can see anything, it's too late to do anything about it. Instead, the pilot will be in charge of the mission, monitoring the aircraft and its systems, the flight path on large displays, and his most important task will be dealing with emergencies. For example, upper air temperature differences, whether over the target area or refueling zone, and problems with the flight systems. The RSO, in turn, will be responsible for sensors, radars, and spy equipment. As time went on, Aurora became increasingly mythologized until in 2017, Skunkworks CEO Rob Weiss indirectly confirmed the existence of a hypersonic research project, adding that the technology had matured and the team was now working on launching a hypersonic aircraft. It remains to be seen whether he was talking about Aurora or about the SR-72 hypersonic vehicle being developed in the depths of Lockheed Martin, which has already earned the nickname Son of Blackbird. Or is this the same SR-72, what has been developed and tested over the past 30 years within the framework of the Aurora project? Time will tell, and we, in turn, will definitely let you know about it. What do you think? Was the SR-72 the same mysterious Aurora that frightened onlookers in different parts of the world back in the 1990s? Share your guesses in